My mother kicked me out of the house on my own birthday and said, "You are not our daughter. You are just a burden." My name is Sarah Mitchell, and that day I walked out with nothing but a bag and $47 in my pocket. 10 years later, I walked back into that same company, not as an employee this time, but as its new owner. And when I opened the boardroom door, my entire family was sitting right there. The moment they saw me, the whole room went silent. This is my story. Sarah Mitchell had always known, somewhere deep down, that she was different in her family's eyes. Not because anyone had ever said it directly, not until that morning, but because of the thousand small moments that came before it. The way her mother's eyes would soften for her brother Kevin but stay flat and distant when they landed on her. The way birthdays in the house were always family celebrations that somehow never quite included her the way they included him. The way she'd learned from a very young age to need as little as possible because needing things seemed to annoy people. She was 22 years old on the morning it happened, and she woke up with the small, foolish hope that today might be different. It was her birthday, after all. Surely today, of all days, her mother would look at her the way mothers were supposed to look at their daughters. She came downstairs in her pajamas, hair still messy from sleep, and found the kitchen unusually quiet. Her mother, Diane Mitchell, was sitting at the dining table, dressed as if she had somewhere important to be, a stack of papers neatly arranged in front of her. Her older brother Kevin was there too, along with his fiancée, Melissa, who wouldn't quite meet Sarah's eyes. "Morning," Sarah said carefully, sensing something was off. "Everything okay?" "Sit down, Sarah," Diane said. Her voice had the particular coldness Sarah had learned to fear over the years. Not shouting, not angry, just flat and final, like a door closing. Sarah sat. She noticed her hands were already trembling, though she didn't yet know why. "We need to talk about the living situation," Diane began, not looking up from the papers. "Kevin and Melissa are getting married next month. They'll need this house. There's more space here for a family, and it makes more sense for them to start their life here than to buy something new." Sarah blinked. "Okay, but where would I?" "That's the thing, sweetheart." Diane finally looked up, and there was no warmth in her eyes at all. "You're 22 now. It's time you learned to stand on your own. You can't keep depending on us forever." "Depending on you?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Mom, I have a job. I pay for my own clothes, my own school books. I don't even ask you for anything." "That's not the point," Kevin interrupted, his tone sharp. "The point is, this is our family's house, and honestly, Sarah, you've never really felt like part of this family anyway." The words landed like a physical blow. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. "What is that supposed to mean?" she whispered. Diane sighed, the sigh of someone forced to say something unpleasant but necessary. "Sarah, your father, my husband, took you in when you were 3 years old. Your birth parents were gone, and he felt sorry for you, so he brought you into this family. I went along with it because I loved him. But he's been dead for 6 years now, and honestly..." She paused, choosing her next words with surgical precision. "You were always his responsibility, not mine. Not ours." "I'm your daughter," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "I've been your daughter for 19 years. "You're not our daughter," Diane said, each word deliberate, final, devastating. "You are not our blood. You were a kindness my husband extended to a stranger's child, and now that he's gone, that kindness has run its course. You're not our daughter. You are just a burden we've carried out of obligation for far too long." The kitchen went silent. Sarah stared at the woman who had raised her, fed her, clothed her, sat through school plays and parent-teacher conferences, and searched her face for even a flicker of doubt, of regret, of love. She found nothing. "You can't be serious," Sarah finally managed. "We are," Kevin said. "There's a bag packed for you upstairs. We already took care of it. It's better this way for everyone." Sarah went numb. She walked upstairs like she was moving through water, every step heavy and slow, and found her belongings, years of her life, condensed into a single duffel bag sitting on her stripped bed. Someone had already taken the sheets off. They had planned this. They had planned this on her birthday. When she came back downstairs, Diane handed her an envelope. Inside was $47 in cash, For a bus ticket and a few meals, Diane said, as if that made this an act of generosity rather than abandonment. Where am I supposed to go? Sarah asked, and for the first time, her voice broke completely. That's not our problem anymore, Kevin said, already turning away, already done with the conversation, done with her. Sarah walked out of the only home she had ever known, the door closing behind her with a quiet, final click that she would hear in her memory for years afterward. She stood on the sidewalk in the late afternoon light, 22 years old, homeless, with $47 in her pocket and a bag over her shoulder, and she cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet, exhausted tears that came from somewhere too deep to easily reach. It was her birthday. The first few months were the hardest of Sarah's life. She stayed in a women's shelter for the first 2 weeks while she looked for work, taking any job she could find, whitersing during the day, cleaning offices at night. She slept in a small rented room above a laundromat, the hum of dryers her constant companion through thin walls. There were nights she genuinely wondered if she would make it. Nights where she sat on the edge of her narrow bed, doing the math on her tiny savings, wondering if she'd have enough for both rent and food that month. She thought, more than once, about calling her mother, about begging to come home. But every time she picked up the phone, she remembered the flatness in Diane's eyes, the ease with which she'd said, "You are not our daughter," and she put the phone back down. If they didn't want her, she decided, she would build a life so undeniable that her absence would never again be dismissed as nothing. She enrolled in night classes at a community college, studying business administration while working 2 jobs. She was exhausted constantly, running on 4, sometimes 5 hours of sleep, surviving on coffee and stubbornness. But slowly, gradually, things began to shift. A regular at the diner where she waitressed turned out to be a small business consultant. His name was Robert Chin, and he noticed something in Sarah that most people overlooked, a sharp, analytical mind hiding behind polite customer service smiles. He started leaving her business books along with his tips. Eventually, he offered her a part-time position at his consulting firm, filing paperwork and organizing client files. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was a door, and Sarah walked through it with everything she had. Over the next 3 years, she worked her way up from filing clerk to junior analyst, absorbing everything she could about business strategy, finance, and operations. She finished her degree, graduating with honors despite everything stacked against her. Robert became something like a mentor, then something like family, the family she'd never truly had. "You have an instinct for this," he told her once, reviewing a market analysis she'd put together on her own time unprompted. "Most people twice your age don't see patterns the way you do." At 26, Sarah left the consulting firm to start her own small technology company with a former classmate, building software solutions for small businesses. It was terrifying. She poured every cent of savings into it, worked 18-hour days, faced rejection after rejection from investors who saw a young woman with no family backing and dismissed her instantly. But she didn't quit. She had already survived the worst things she could imagine, being told by her own family that she wasn't wanted. Everything after that felt, somehow, survivable. By 28, her company had its first major client. By 29, it had 10. The technology she and her partner had built, an efficient, elegant inventory and logistics management system, began attracting attention from larger firms looking to license or acquire the technology. And then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, everything changed again. Sarah's lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia Alvarez, called and asked Sarah to come into her office, something about an old matter that's finally been resolved. Sarah sat across from Patricia's desk, confused, as the lawyer slid a thick folder toward her. "Sarah, I need to tell you something about your biological father," Patricia began. Sarah's chest tightened. She knew almost nothing about her birth parents, only that they had died when she was very young, before Michael Mitchell, the man she'd called Dad, had adopted her. "Your father's name was David Reyes," Patricia continued. "He died when you were 3, yes, but before he died, he was a founding partner and significant shareholder in an engineering firm called Meridian Dynamics." Sarah stared blankly. "I don't understand. What does that have to do with me?" "Everything," Patricia said. When your father died, his shares in the company were placed into a trust for you, his only child, to be released when you turn 30 or upon certain conditions being met. Michael Mitchell was made trustee when he adopted you, but the trust was structured very deliberately by your father's estate lawyer, specifically so that Michael could manage it, but never touch it, sell it, or transfer it out of your name. Sarah's mind was spinning. So, this trust, it's just been sitting there? For 27 years. Growing, Patricia said with a small, knowing smile. Meridian Dynamics has expanded significantly over the past 2 decades. It merged 8 years ago with a logistics and manufacturing conglomerate. She paused, letting the next words land with full weight. It's now called Mitchell Dynamics, Sarah. Your father, the man who adopted you, never changed the company name after the merger. He kept it, perhaps out of respect for the man whose company it originally was, or perhaps simply because it was already established. Either way, the trust holding your biological father's original 51% ownership stake has remained fully intact and legally protected this entire time. Sarah felt the air leave the room. Mitchell Dynamics, she repeated slowly. That's where Kevin works. Yes, Patricia said. Your brother has been working there as a mid-level operations manager for the past 6 years, completely unaware that the majority ownership of the company legally belongs to you. Sarah sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything. The years of struggle. The nights she'd wondered if she'd have enough to eat. The birthday she'd spent crying on a sidewalk with $47 in her pocket while, unbeknownst to her, she had been the rightful majority owner of a multi-million-dollar company the entire time. Why didn't anyone tell me sooner? She finally asked, her voice quiet. The trust had strict conditions, Patricia explained. It required you to reach 30, or to demonstrate, through an independent audit, that you had built sustainable, independent financial success on your own merit, without relying on the trust or family support. Your father wanted to make absolutely certain that whoever inherited his company's ownership would be someone capable of leading it, not someone who'd simply had it handed to them. She smiled slightly. Sarah, you triggered that second condition 18 months ago, when your own company crossed 7 figures in annual revenue. I've been waiting for the right moment to bring you in. Sarah sat back in her chair, overwhelmed, tears gathering in her eyes, not from sadness this time, but from something far more complicated. Vindication, grief for the father she never knew, and a slow, rising sense of quiet, powerful resolve. I want to see the company, she said finally. I want to see all of it, the books, the board, everything. Patricia nodded, sliding another folder across the desk. I thought you might say that. There's a board meeting scheduled in 3 weeks. As majority shareholder, you have every legal right to attend, to speak, and to take formal control of your position on the board, effective immediately if you choose. Sarah looked down at the folder, at her father's name, David Reyes, printed neatly on the original incorporation documents from over 2 decades ago. I choose, she said. The 3 weeks that followed were a blur of preparation. Sarah worked closely with Patricia and a team of financial advisors to fully understand the company she now controlled, its structure, its financials, its ongoing projects, its personnel. She learned that Mitchell Dynamics was solid but stagnant, coasting on old contracts without much innovation, exactly the kind of company that could benefit enormously from the kind of forward-thinking technology strategy Sarah had spent years building expertise in. She also learned, through the employee directory Patricia obtained, exactly where Kevin worked, what his role was, and, with a strange, hollow feeling in her chest, that her mother, Diane, had recently taken a position as an executive assistant in the same building, having struggled financially in the years since Sarah's father's passing left fewer resources than the family had assumed. The morning of the board meeting, Sarah stood in front of her mirror, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit she'd bought specifically for this day. She thought about the 22-year-old girl who had walked out of her family's house with a duffel bag and $47, and she felt an overwhelming urge to tell that girl, somehow, across time, you are going to be okay. Better than okay. She arrived at Mitchell Dynamics headquarters early, walking through the lobby with a quiet, unshakable calm that surprised even her. The receptionist, unaware of who she was, directed her to the executive boardroom on the 15th floor. Patricia met her outside the boardroom doors. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready for 10 years, Sarah said. Inside the boardroom, the existing board members were already seated, along with several senior executives who had been asked to attend for what they'd been told was an important ownership announcement. Sarah scanned the room and felt her heart stop for just a moment. There, near the far end of the table, sat Kevin, now a department head, his hair slightly grayer at the temples, looking utterly unaware of what was about to happen. Beside him, in a chair near the wall reserved for support staff, sat Diane, holding a notepad, clearly there in her capacity as an executive assistant, not as a decision-maker. Neither of them looked up as Sarah entered. Why would they? The last time they'd seen her, she was a struggling 22-year-old with nothing to her name. Patricia stepped forward first, addressing the room. "Thank you all for being here today. As you know, there has been a long-standing trust holding a majority ownership stake in this company, 51%, established by David Reyes, one of the company's original founders, over 2 decades ago. That trust has now been formally released to its designated beneficiary, who is present with us today, and who will be taking her seat as majority shareholder and incoming chairwoman of the board, effective immediately." A murmur went through the room. Kevin's brow furrowed in confusion. He had never heard his father mentioned in the same sentence as this company's ownership before. Patricia turned toward the door. "I'd like to introduce you all to Ms. Sarah Mitchell." Sarah stepped forward into the light of the boardroom and watched as recognition slowly, devastatingly dawned across her mother's face. Diane's notepad slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a soft thud. Her face drained of color. "Sarah?" Kevin's voice cracked as he half rose from his chair, staring at her like he was seeing a ghost. Sarah looked at her brother, then at her mother, and let the silence stretch just long enough for the weight of the moment to fully settle over the room. Every executive, every board member, watched the unspoken history pass between them, sensing something significant they didn't yet understand. "Hello, Kevin," Sarah said finally, her voice steady, calm, utterly composed. "Mom." She let the word sit for a beat, watching Diane flinch at it. "I believe we have quite a lot to discuss." The entire room fell into stunned silence. The meeting proceeded formally, though nothing about it felt ordinary. Sarah conducted herself with a quiet, commanding professionalism that left no doubt in anyone's mind that she belonged exactly where she now stood. She reviewed financial reports, asked pointed questions about underperforming divisions, and outlined an initial vision for modernizing the company's operations, all while her mother sat frozen near the wall and her brother struggled to reconcile the confident woman in front of him with the girl he'd helped throw out of their family home a decade earlier. After the meeting concluded and the other board members filed out, whispering among themselves, already sensing that significant change was coming to Mitchell Dynamics, Sarah asked Kevin and Diane to stay behind. The three of them sat alone in the now empty boardroom, the silence heavy with 10 years of unspoken history. Diane spoke first, her voice trembling, all her earlier coldness replaced with something that looked uncomfortably like fear. "Sarah, we didn't know. We had no idea about any of this. If you'd known I was going to inherit a company, you wouldn't have thrown me out?" Sarah asked quietly, cutting straight to the heart of it. "That's what you're saying?" Diane's mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer that wouldn't damn her further. "I've thought about this moment for 10 years, Sarah continued, her voice steady, not cruel, but unflinching. "I imagined all kinds of things I might say to you. Some of them were angry. Some of them were cruel, honestly, because that's what pain does to you when you carry it long enough." She paused. "But I've realized something in the years since that birthday. What you said to me, that I wasn't your daughter, that I was just a burden, that was never actually about me. That was about who you decided I was allowed to be in your eyes. And nothing I could have done, nothing I could have achieved, would have changed that because you'd already made your decision long before that morning." Kevin looked down at the table, unable to meet her eyes. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I was young. I just went along with what Mom said." "You are 25, Kevin," Sarah said, not unkindly but firmly. You weren't a child. You made a choice, and I've had to live with the consequences of that choice for a decade. The room was quiet for a long moment. So, what happens now? Diane finally asked, her voice small. Sarah considered the question carefully. She had thought about this too, many times, in the year since Patricia had first told her about the trust. She could have fired them both immediately, could have used her position to make their lives as difficult as they'd once made hers. Part of her, in the rawest, most wounded corner of her heart, wanted exactly that. But she'd also spent 10 years building herself into someone who didn't need to destroy others to feel whole. You'll both keep your jobs, Sarah said finally, watching relief flood into their faces before she continued, but your roles will change. Kevin, you'll step down from your department head position. You'll return to an entry-level role in operations, and you'll have to earn any advancement from there the same way every other employee in this company does, the same way I had to earn everything I have now, starting with nothing. She turned to her mother. Mom, you'll remain in an administrative role, but you will no longer report directly to senior executives. You'll answer to the same performance standards as every other employee here. That's humiliating, Kevin said, his old defensiveness flaring briefly. Yes, Sarah agreed simply. It is. I imagine it must feel a little like being told without warning that everything you thought you were entitled to has been taken away. I imagine it must feel like starting over from nothing, with no one to catch you. She let that land, watching both of their faces carefully. It's a feeling I'm quite familiar with. Neither of them spoke. I'm not doing this to punish you forever, Sarah continued, her voice softening slightly. I'm doing it because you both need to understand, in a way words alone never could, what you took from me and what it actually cost. If over time, you can show me, through how you treat the people around you, through the character you build back up from here, that you've genuinely changed, then things can change between us too. But that will take years, not an apology in a boardroom. And it will have to be earned, the same way everything in my life has had to be earned since the day you put a duffel bag on my stripped bed and called it kindness. She stood, smoothing down her jacket, and looked at them both one final time. Happy almost birthday to me, she said quietly. I turn 32 next month. I plan to celebrate it properly this year, surrounded by people who actually chose to be in my life, rather than people who were simply obligated to be. She walked out of the boardroom, leaving her mother and brother sitting in stunned, humbled silence, and for the first time in 10 years, Sarah Mitchell felt something settle inside her chest that she hadn't felt since she was a little girl. Not vengeance, not even satisfaction exactly, but something quieter and more permanent.
Peace.